Welcome everyone to Highlands Live, and it's an effort by the Highlands Community Association to better connect our community. My name is Benjamin Wagner. Hello. I am the new guy in the neighborhood. I'm going to claim that for at least one more episode, and the new communications lead for the Highlands Community Association. Fun fact about me, I was born in Iowa City, Iowa.
Hello, everyone, and I am Lindsay DeSabatino. I lead our events, and my fun fact is that I am a third-generation Wilmingtonian, which is quite a mouthful, but I'm very proud to be that. Okay, so our Highlands Live goal is simple. We want to meet our neighbors from the Highlands and our surrounding communities in order to discuss local arts, culture, business, parks, and recreation.
So far this season, we've spoken with Delaware Art Museum Executive Director Molly Giordano, local entrepreneur David Tuttleman, Red Clay School Board District Dr. Adriana Bohm, Independent School Leader Vince Watchhorn, and Wilmington Park Superintendent Alana Delaney. And tonight, in just 1 second more, we welcome Delaware Senator Sarah McBride to the program. But first, just a little bit more about the show.
So each 30-minute program features a live interview and moderated audience Q&A. So right now you are all muted, but we really want to see, so turn those cameras on, and we want to hear from you. So don't be surprised if I take you off mute tonight, because we really want to encourage discussion and interaction during the Q&A. Also, we are recording the Highlands Live, so that little red dot up there means that you are being recorded. When the show's over, Benjamin will do a write-up, he'll send it around, and we're going to post a video on our brand new website.
What? That's right. If you haven't been to highlandscommunityassociation.org lately, as in the last 12 hours or so, we've redesigned it, same great content and then some, with some additional resources, links. We're adding some stuff on history of the neighborhood, and all of the content that we've produced in the last couple of weeks with Highlands Live will go there, as well as always, the place to sign up for newsletters and so forth. More on that, and we'll take a look at it at tomorrow's spring meeting.
And that's right. I mean, we tease, but this really is the best Highlands week ever. We're starting tonight with Sarah, and tomorrow we have our HCA spring meeting with the mayor. Sarah's back on again, Representative Nathan Field, Gerald Brady, and more. I mean, this is like Highlands celebrities. Yeah. 7 p.m. on Zoom. The link's in your email, or you can go to highlandscommunityassociation.org.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's easy.
Yeah, a huge one.
So without further ado, let's welcome our guest. Yay, Senator Sarah McBride. Hello, Senator. How are you tonight?
Hello, and please, we're all neighbors. So it's Sarah here and always. It's so wonderful to be on. I have such a huge smile on my face because I am so excited for this. And my goodness, I deal with a lot of civic and community associations. You all take the gold medal for your communications and your programming. This is awesome.
All right, thank you. Well, so everybody knows your incredible story. Let me do a quick recap. Sarah was born and raised right here in the Highlands. She graduated Cab Calloway School of the Arts before attending American University. Just a quick list here. Interned at the White House, led the successful effort to pass landmark non-discrimination laws here in Delaware, authored the deeply moving, profoundly inspiring 2018 memoir, Tomorrow Will Be Different, among many, many other luminous accomplishments. The youngest recipient of the Order of the First State, the state's highest civilian honor. That's truly awesome. And she is the first openly transgender state senator in the history of the entire United States. Welcome, Senator Sarah McBride. One more time.
Thank you.
So I got to pause on that real quick, because Lindsay and I were talking, you just don't know a lot of firsts in your life. Like, one rarely knows a real first. And I suspect you've been asked this, but how do you carry that? How do you think about that? Or do you just not?
That's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, I am reminded of the opportunity and privilege that I have. I am lucky by definition because I've had these types of opportunities where I am the first. But of course, there are unique responsibilities that come from that. Ultimately, though, on a day-to-day basis, I don't really think of it. I am so focused on the day-to-day of my job, the day-to-day of constituent services, of community meetings, of legislation that we're working on, that from a day-to-day standpoint, I'm not really thinking about being the first. I'm thinking about being a good senator for this district. But I will say that every once in a while, when it does hit me, when I'm walking around the Highlands, and marveling at the fact that I have this incredible opportunity and privilege to represent this community, to represent it as my authentic self, and to have been elected as my authentic self. Honestly, it brings me to tears, because I think about the journey that my family has been on, a journey that has been defined by the friendships and relationships that we have with people in this community, that's been inspired in part by those relationships. And I think about how growing up here, I feared that I wouldn't be able to come back to this community. And as good and decent as people were here, I worried, because there weren't really examples of people like me who are out, healthy, embraced here or elsewhere in Delaware. And so the fact that I now have this opportunity is comforting, it's empowering, but more than anything else, it's deeply moving. And I will, if you see me walking through the neighborhood crying and wiping tears from my eyes, don't be surprised. It happens, and I'm just so incredibly honored and privileged to have this position, this role, and the opportunity to serve a community that I just deeply care about.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you do in our community. So let's go back to your roots here. Can you describe your Highlands? What's your view? What's your day-to-day experience? Any streets, parks, landmarks that stand out?
Well, I'm a 17th Street baby. And I really grew up, my childhood was defined by the summer nights on 17th Street with kids from all around the area coming out to play tag and capture the flag and ghost in the graveyard and all of those wonderful games that I hope kids still play. And what's really lovely right now is I think we're sort of in the life cycle of the Highlands, where you're seeing more young families with young kids moving in, which is what it was like when I was growing up. There was just so many of us that every single night we came out and we played those games. And so for me, sort of my childhood is my Highlands experience, and my Highlands experience is summed up in those childhood memories and those childhood nights and friendships that I continue to maintain to this day. For me, I think those formative experiences, those memories, I still cherish. And the relationships, when like I was saying, when I came out in this community, the goodness that I saw in people, I think it was 2012. I think a lot of times people struggle with something that they don't quite understand. And it was before there was, any reasonable amount of public understanding around trans identities, and to have seen people of every different background, of every different political affiliation, just so quickly step up and welcome my family with love and with support. To me, that experience not only motivated me to run for office, but I think in many ways informs my passion to say, this is the experience that I've had in the Highlands. It's an experience of compassion, of love. Let's make that a reality for everyone in the Highlands and beyond, so that whether you're someone who was born and raised in this community, or someone like Benjamin who's recently moved into the community, whether you're someone who looks like me or whether you look different than me, let's make this a community that really lives up to our values as a community of neighbors, as a state of neighbors. And let's ensure that what I've seen, that goodness that I've seen, that more and more people are able to experience it, see it, live it.
I want to zero in, Sarah, on the neighbors thing a little bit, right? So I briefly mentioned that I made a film about Mr. Rogers that I premiered on PBS in 2012. And when I saw that you used that language, I was like, I must meet this person, must talk about this idea of state of neighbors. So will you unpack that phrase for me? Clearly it's a small state, so there's a real intimacy. That's what you're getting at? There's a, everybody sort of thing?
I think part of it is absolutely, it's that element of Delaware that is, we are small, we have the capacity for that proximity to one another, and through that proximity have the capacity to really unleash a level of empathy and compassion that I think should be at the root of our politics, of our communities. I think the reality is we know that that is not necessarily evenly felt across communities, across our state. But I think it's us at our best. And what I want to see is us live up to our best in more circumstances. And, I mentioned briefly when we were talking before this started about what I sort of the values and the narrative that I have tried to use around Delaware is really rooted in this idea of what I call the politics of Mr. Rogers, this neighborly duty to care. And if we can take that sort of Delaware ethos and apply it to our communities and to our politics, I think that we can have not just good policy outcomes, but really a better, more welcoming, more compassionate community in all that we do. And I think, a lot of times one of the things that we struggle with as Delawareans is someone says, what do you like about Delaware? And we're like, well, I like that we've got good beaches, or that we're close to big cities. And those are true. But I know for me, one of the things I always struggled with was that intangible, more ethereal element of us as Delawareans. And it's that state of neighbors, that we are small, that there's one degree of separation. And again, I think if we can tap into that, there's this really incredible capacity for us to implement policies that I believe are not just and compassionate, but smart, and that really help us live up to what we think of ourselves and what we are at our best.
Beautiful. I'm really excited that we share that in common. I'm not surprised, but I look forward to digging into that and sharing the film with you. I want to ask a little tour guide McBride question. I did my research, didn't I? Can you tell us a couple of underknown facts about the state, a person, a place, a thing, anything? What do you got? Like, well, it's something that you've uncovered that you really like to point out that's off the beaten path, for example.
Oh God, that's a great question. One of the things I always really love about the district that I now represent is how often the first Senate district, which includes this area, the Highlands, all the way up through Claymont, is just how often this district has been at the forefront of change, not just here in Delaware, but nationally. The Underground Railroad went up 52. The path toward Brown v. Board of Education, we just celebrated the 60th anniversary. The path goes right through Claymont, because the Claymont High School and the Claymont 12, which is a collection of 12 students and their families who integrated the Claymont High School, the first public high school in the nation in a legally segregated state to integrate. That was right in the first Senate district. Philly Pike was the path that Caesar Rodney took up on that thunderstorm night to cast the tie-breaking vote for the Declaration of Independence from Delaware. There are just so many elements of our history that go through our community, that go through this district. And so I always say it's good being first. It's good being the first Senate district. It's good being the first state. And I think about all of that history that has existed in this community, in this area of Delaware, and how that legacy, that history of change making is a responsibility that we all carry on in our lives today, to continue to be at the forefront of change, not just in Delaware, but nationally. And so that's certainly something I talked about a lot during the campaign. I'm a student of history, but you come on a tour with me. If I have friends from out of town, I'll take them on a tour. I'm like, oh, we'll just go for a drive. And then like 7 hours later, after, all the different little facts and tour stops just within northern Newcastle County, they're like, okay, can we please finish this tour? Because I think I've learned everything about Delaware that I need to ever know.
Sign me up. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I'm the guy.
Actually, we were thinking of walking toward the Highlands, but let's do a driving tour of Newcastle County. That sounds amazing.
I'm the guy who put the girls in the backseat, drove the entire length of the Brandywine reading the history. So I'm really excited about that. So thank you. And I look forward to leaning in. I want to talk a little bit about resilience. It's this idea of transformation, this idea that we're all becoming ideally our best selves, right? Like, and that typically those the greatest leap forwards occur, during challenges and adversity. When you were in the depths of some of your most challenging moments, you'd have to tell me what those are, but I'm guessing, for example, the loss of your husband, Andy. I, read that in your book, and it's just impossible to, frankly, did my best to step into, but to imagine the depth of sorrow and grief. So I'm just interested selfishly to learn from you and to share with our neighbors, where do you go? What is the shape of the energy or the color or this? What do you use to move through that kind of transformation into a new, better self? How do you think about those moments? Long wind up.
No, it's such a great question, because it really is at the heart of, I think, my worldview. And I consider myself a sort of unceasingly optimistic person. And it's in part because of my experiences with tragedy that I feel that way. And I think I am that way. I think a couple things. One, I am always very mindful through the experiences that I have, that as difficult as they may be, they are still relatively easy compared to the experiences of a lot of other people. And I think that perspective for me has always been grounding and humbling. I think back to the experience of Andy's battle with cancer and being his caregiver, watching him battle through that and seeing very clearly how lucky I was, because I wasn't the one battling cancer. But then thinking also about how lucky we both were, to have health insurance, how lucky we both were to have an employer. We both worked at the same place that allowed us to take time off, paid time off, to focus on his health. I think about how lucky we were to have that time together, how lucky we were to have friends and family who were there for us. And, now as an elected official, I'm very mindful that as a government, as elected officials, we can't eliminate all pain. We can't stop all loss, but what we can do is make life a little bit easier when hard times hit. And I know that without any one of those layers of support, of privilege that I brought to those experiences, without any one of those layers, I wouldn't have been able to make it through. And so I think, one, I am constantly reminded of my own luck, my own fortune in the experiences and the hardship that I face, and that perspective is grounding. But then two, and I write about this in the book, during Andy's last month, my brother, who's a radiation oncologist and has worked with and treated so many people and so many families who were walking to their death. He said to me right after Andy found out that his cancer was terminal, he said, "This is going to be incredibly difficult, but that you should take stock in the acts of amazing grace that would fill your life." Mm-hmm. And that grace was truly everywhere. And it's almost a trite cliche. But when my brother said that, it completely shifted my perspective in that month. But then because of that month, the rest of my worldview shifted. And so now I can't help but see that amazing grace. A friend, after Andy passed away, I was marveling at that grace, at the miracles that filled our life. And he said, at the end of the day, hope as a concept only makes sense in the face of hardship. And so I bring that appreciation, I think, for, you can only know true joy and true hope in contrast to the hardship and the pain that you experience. And, I going back to Mr. Rogers, throughout this pandemic, I've been thinking about those lessons that I learned, that amazing grace that I saw in my own experience, that I'm seeing right now. And I think it's summed up best in that quote from Mr. Rogers, where he talks about when he would see something scary on the news, his mom would tell him to look for the helpers. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've seen. And I think it goes directly back to that concept of all of us feeling this neighborly duty to care for one another. And if we can take these individual acts of grace, of these individual acts of sacrifice and service to one another, those moments of being helpers, if we can take that from an individual to a more collective approach, I really think that we will all be better off for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. And to bring it back to Fred, yeah, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Lindsay's you got to give me a minute to digest that. That was quite moving, Sarah.
Yes.
Lindsay, going to take a
Oh yeah.
quick
So actually, we do have a fun question for you right now. Is at what age did you request a podium for Christmas so that you could present a campaign speech?
I would say, oh God, this is
destined for leadership.
So many people who are on here knew me growing up and know how much of an insufferable nerd I was. I asked for a podium when I was probably, I want to say 11 years old.
That's amazing.
And I had I upgraded my podiums over the course of my teenage years. The older I got, the better podium I got. But I remember, I think I was probably 11, and I got this book of presidential rhetoric and speeches and stood at this podium in my pajamas recounting, FDR's first inaugural address about the only thing we have to fear is fear ourselves, and JFK's first inaugural address, which everyone knows, and would memorize them and then deliver them in my pajamas, or some cases my underwear, for my parents. But now everyone knows that, and it's just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. I got asked it on national television on Sapphires and just shriveled up in embarrassment.
It's a shame we didn't have phones with camera then, so we could have a video of you on 17th Street.
Thank God.
Speeches.
Thank God we didn't have any of that for so many different reasons when I was growing up.
So do we have more? We actually we've unsurprisingly gone a tad long. We have some questions for the audience, Linz, or do you want to get a couple more? Because boy, do we have a few for you, Sarah.
We do have a few more, but what I will say is if anyone would like to come off mute and ask a question directly, let me know. I can unmute you. Or if you want me to read it from the chat, feel free. So I'll just take a moment to pause here. If not, Benjamin, you can go to the next question while people are gathering thoughts.
Sure. Well, so you recently passed your first 100 plus days. I have a hunch you know the exact number. I'm just interested, like the biggest surprise. Like what is the what, or is there nothing? Like you got the place down?
Definitely, I do not have the place down. There is a lot to learn, and starting a new job remotely is difficult. Starting a new job that's like entirely based on relationships remotely is that much more difficult. I'm lucky that I knew a lot of my colleagues ahead of the election because of my advocacy work. I think a couple things. One, just on a day-to-day basis, I am surprised at how much it's like drinking from a fire hose. The amount of incoming really is startling. But I think it's a reflection of something broader, which is I marvel at the opportunity and the scope of change that we can bring, that this role allows for. Most of the issues that matter to us on a daily basis, they are handled at the state level. And so the opportunity to work on so many different issues that I'm passionate about, that my colleagues are passionate about, from healthcare to education to economic opportunity to equal rights, every single day getting to work on those issues, digest and discuss those issues. And when I have the opportunity to prime sponsor something, lead on those issues, it's really an incredible thing to marvel at. And so I'm constantly in all of that. That surprises me every so often. And just the sheer amount that is coming to us. Because, this is always true. There's always a lot that's going on, but this year, because of so many different crises and just issues coming to the fore, we are tasked with grappling with a lot, and it's both overwhelming and awe-inspiring all at the same time.
It must be. Linz,
it looks like Madeline has a question for the group. Madeline, are you able to come off mute?
Perfect tee up, Sarah, for my question. Tell us about, well, tell everyone why SB1 is called SB1, and then tell us about the prospects of it this session.
Sure. Senate Bill 1 is legislation that I recently introduced. It's neither my first bill nor the actual first bill that's introduced. Every senator, at least every new senator, they reserve the bill number that corresponds with your district number. And since we are the fighting first, I get Senate Bill 1, which is really neat. And I saved it for legislation that's near and dear to my heart. As I was talking about before, you know, so much of my work is informed by both what I have heard from constituents and also, you know, the life experiences that I bring to the table, and knowing how lucky Andy and I were, as I mentioned, to have jobs that ensured that we could really take on the full-time roles of Andy getting treatment and me caring for him, instilled in me a deep passion for paid family and medical leave. 9 states plus DC now have paid family and medical leave insurance programs that essentially, and what SB1 would do is essentially create a state administered insurance program that would provide wage replacement for Delawareans who are out on leave for up to 12 weeks for several different qualifying events, including bonding with a new child, taking care of their own health through a serious health condition, caring for a loved one with a serious health condition, survivors of domestic violence, seeking safety and security, and finally, military families that are adjusting to the deployment or return from deployment of a loved one in the service. And so I recently introduced this legislation a little over a week ago. I personally believe that this is at the heart of both the current public health crisis that we face and the budding economic recovery that we are experiencing right now. I think if there is a lesson that has been learned through this crisis, it's that people shouldn't have to give up their income in the face of an illness. And we saw that with COVID. We expanded our unemployment insurance program to provide wage replacement while people were out. And whether it's COVID or cancer, the same principle applies, whether it's a global public health crisis or an individual health crisis. So I introduced this legislation. I believe that it is at the heart of our economic recovery, our current public health crisis, and I believe at the heart of Delaware writing our next economic chapter, because I think for Delaware to succeed, we have to compete for talent. And for Delaware to compete for talent, we have to ensure that people know that when they come to Delaware, we are going to be competitive with the pay and with the benefits that they might get in other places. And again, 9 states plus DC have this type of program. And so if we are going to win the competition for talent as a state, I believe this is one of the critical next steps we have to take to develop the kind of workforce and to keep the workforce that Delaware needs to grow and attract business. I also believe that it's a smart policy because right now, increasingly, you are seeing large employers provide this benefit on their own dime. And that leaves small and medium-sized businesses struggling to afford to provide this increasingly expected benefit, which again puts them at a disadvantage in that competition for talent when they're talking about recruiting and retaining employees. And this program provides undoubtedly the most cost-effective, affordable way of delivering this benefit, which would therefore help to level the playing field between small businesses and larger businesses. That's one of the reasons why in the states that have done this, small businesses, more than 90% of businesses report that this kind of program has either no impact or a positive impact on their bottom line, and small businesses were more likely than large businesses to report that it had a positive impact on their bottom line. That's my little spiel about the bill. Mm-hmm. We've introduced it, and we introduced it with 13 co-sponsors in the state Senate at introduction. This bill needs 13 votes to pass. And in the House, we're working on making sure that we have the votes that we need to pass it there. I don't think we're going to pass it by June 30th through both chambers. A lot of the conversation also rests on what happens at the federal level, where President Biden has introduced a similar proposal. But we're working on building momentum. I've been engaging with the state chamber, the county chamber for months now, and we'll continue to have conversations with them moving forward as we seek to sort of perfect the legislation and to ensure that it's informed by all the different stakeholders. So I don't have a specific timeline on when that bill is going to pass, but I am optimistic that within the 151st General Assembly, which is the current General Assembly we're in, whether it's this year or next year, that Delaware will be the hopefully 10th state in the nation with this kind of program.
Well, Jan Jessup actually is a perfect segue to that as you talk about timeline. Jan, I'm taking you off mute.
Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Sarah. My question was, do you think that a 6-month legislative session is long enough to accomplish everything that needs to be done, especially when, 6 or 8 weeks is taken up by budget presentations and the Joint Finance Committee?
That's a great question. Probably not, as I'm facing the last, I think we've got 11 days, 11 legislative days left in the session. And
wow,
we're seeing, we're going to be, Thursday is our final day in for then 2 weeks where there's budget markup. Then we go back for 3.5 weeks in June. Probably not. I mean, it's the short answer. The challenge is that we are a part-time legislature. And a lot of folks in the legislature have other jobs. So meeting more than we do would put even more of a strain on those folks who have full-time jobs. Some of those jobs are incredibly flexible. Some folks are in positions where their job is less flexible, or there are a lot of folks who just never run for the legislature because they know they couldn't balance what is essentially a full-time job already. Certainly while we're in session, with their full-time job. So, there's not really any conversation about extending the time we're in session. We will be going back in this fall for redistricting. I'm not sure whether we'll grapple with other issues then. But and there are a number of states where they are essentially full-time legislatures, not just in action, but actually in statute. We are a full-time legislature in terms of the amount of time that the job requires for a person, but not in statute or in the amount of time we meet.
All right.
I don't know, Benjamin. I'm thinking Sarah for president. What do you think?
You're not alone.
No, never.
Say that now.
I wouldn't want to give up the ability to walk around the Highlands.
True. Yeah, we'd have Sarah jams instead of Joe jams.
You guys, we're actually at time, which is a shame, except the good news is that tomorrow Sarah's going to join us for our Highlands Community Association spring meeting. So if you have a burning question between now and then, you can pose it there. So thus ends our first season. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I promise my answers tomorrow will be less long-winded, but we probably won't deal with as sort of deep and existential questions as we did this evening, which I absolutely love because it's my bread and butter. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you all, and I can't wait to see you all in the neighborhood.
Yeah, in person. Thank you, Sarah. Everybody, please join us tomorrow. That's Wednesday, May 19th for the Community Association Spring Meeting. Presentations and Q&A from Mayor Mike Brzezicki, Senator Sarah McBride, Representatives Gerald Brady, Nathan Field, and many more folks. As always, you can read all about that as well as our community food drive at the Highlands Community Association website. That's highlandscommunityassociation.org. Until next time, I'm Benjamin Wagner.
Is it still limited to 100 people?
It is still limited to 100 people.
That's a Dennison
Get
question.
there early. Yeah. Did he put you up to that?
No, I put me up to it.
Thank you. Yes. So get there early. We do have a limited seat on Zoom. Thank you for mentioning that, Jen.
So
Until
get
then,
super early.
I'm Benjamin Wagner.
We'll see you around the neighborhood. I'm Lindsay Sarantino. Have a great night, everyone.